He didn't hide the fact that he thinks they're going to have a pretty good team this year. He emphasized starting fast so they don't put themselves in the position they put themselves in last year, playing really all these stressful games, must-win games down the stretch. And I don't think you say things like that unless you think you can back it up, right? But he emphasized starting fast from a seasonal standpoint. I want to come out the gate and be as aggressive as we can in the first 8 games and not make the back 8 games as tough as they were last year. Of course, there's a 9th game, but their bye actually comes after game 8.
Yeah, I think he said without saying it, this is the best team on paper. Now, they have had multiple teams go to NFC Championship games. They had a team that led the NFC Championship game last year, and then they had a team that led the Super Bowl in the fourth quarter. So he's had some really, really good teams. But I do agree with him on paper, this is their best team because I think all their best players are in the prime of their career. Some of their young ascending players are better than the guys that they had young ascending back, in 19. They do have some question marks, but to me, if your question marks are guards and centers, like elite coaches and elite personnel staffs figure that out. So that's the least your worries. I'm sorry. I
would say Shanahan's words back up what you're saying.
They do have a major question mark at quarterback.
But just to back up your point, he does not. He's like, yeah, well, Brunskill will play some there. We got another guy. We got some rookies who can play guard. We'll see. We'll figure it out.
Let's say Trey didn't exist and Jimmy was just going to come back on the team. Going into his last year of his contract, kind of a prove-it deal. I think most people would pick this team to make the playoffs, right? Jimmy Garoppolo is their quarterback?
In this NFC especially, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I think a lot of people are going to pick him to make the playoffs as is. The NFC is dramatically worse than the AFC. That's another thing he has working for him. But the AFC division, they do play the AFC West. So they get 4, it's a lot easier to play the AFC South or even the AFC East than it is the AFC West. All 4 of those games, all 4 of those teams can win the division. All 4 of those teams, if I told you find a way to get to 11 and 12 wins, easily believable. That's hard. I do think it helps that in theory, the Niners should be able to beat Seattle, though it hasn't happened much for Kyle. They got swept last year. I would say anything less than winning those 2 games. So it's easy to kind of see them take advantage of their situation, but their team on paper, skill guys loaded, best left tackle in the game. Their linebacking core stacked. Their pass rush should be awesome. I mean, they have a lot of DB bodies, right?
They're better at corner this year than they were coming into last year, you'd say, right? Just because they have some more experience.
Well, how much better do you feel about
Ambry?
I mean, you have to be dramatically better, right? I mean, even Kyle said, I didn't know if he was an NFL player in training camp. And I did see Jason Verrett starting the league, the season on PUP. No one knows what this guy's going to do. It cannot be disputed that if this guy's just on the field, he will not suck.
And now, they spent money at that position too.
Corner. Oh yeah. Ward. So I don't know. I'm not saying like this guy's going to live up to his draft status. His most famous move of his career is easily the Grant Cohn situation. But Javon Kinlaw, if he's cleared for practice, he is healthy. Now, can he stay that way? No one knows. But I think you and I agree. I think the 49ers would agree. If I just tell you he plays 16 games, they are in great shape. Like if he's playing in games, he is bigger and stronger. Again, I'm not saying he's going to get a lot of sacks or anything. He will be a very, very useful player for them.
Yeah.
Now, that is a huge, what would you put as over-under on Javon Kinlaw games? 6.5, 8.5? You went 12?
Yeah, I mean, if you said, if it's 8, that is way too low.
Well, then he's an injury bust.
I agree with you. If you just said he plays 15 games, I'd go, great. I don't need to know anything. Don't even need to know his numbers. Yeah. That's really good. That's great.
If you tell me he plays 15 games and all the other guys stay healthy, meaning Armstead, Bosa, and I guess I just feel out of it. Who's the pass rusher they drafted from USC?
Drake Jackson.
Yeah, I almost said Lawrence. Drake Jackson. I think Drake Jackson's going to be good. So they're front 7, and they were asked about it in the press conference. Just on paper, it's excellent. It's I mean, guy, they were kicking ass and taking names last year with no name guys. So if Bosa has another huge season, which he will if he's healthy, Armstead is just a solid player, and Drake Jackson on top of just the random guys that Kasarik, rotates in. I think the way Kyle looks at it is like, our defense is going to be like 2019. And we're going to come out like the way when he talked about starting fast, I think they're going to emphasize that every single day. And they're going to try to start the season throwing haymakers. Not that they didn't necessarily last year, but it was like they kind of eased their way in, that I think they're going to come out and try to start strong.
I think you're right. He wasn't just saying what every coach says, which is we have to win games early. He was talking about the way they're going to play. He didn't say we need to start fast. He's like, I want to start the season aggressive, which to me is what you're talking about. He's talking about the style in which they're going to play, right?
Yeah.
Does that mean D'Amico's going to blitz even more? Does that mean Trey Lance is going to throw the ball down the field more than we think he's going to? Does that mean that the first play of the game is going to be some running back hitting the hole at 87 miles an hour? Yes. We should be able to bet on that at DraftKings. What will the first run or pass? What would you get like run at DraftKings Sportsbook, John? Niners first. Would it be like plus 5?
I could see play action first play of the game. I could also see. I do think in his mind, and he's not wrong, it's the best starting the season, best skill group he's had. Debo in his prime, Ayuk coming into his own, Kittle in his prime. They had Juwan Jennings has established himself. Kyle loves him, and he's just a good player who's made plays in big time games. Because the one thing he keeps saying about Trey is like you never really know till you see it. Like he's seen it with Juwan. When the lights were the brightest and the time and they needed him, he came through in games and leading into the playoffs and then the playoffs. If you have really good skill guys, we've been talking about this forever. Like that's why I'm not that hard on like Trevor Lawrence or listen, Zach Wilson. I'm not the biggest fan, but it's hard for me to judge you when you inherit like those. This guy's hitting the ground with Pro Bowl wide receiver, Pro Bowl tight end, a stud number 2 wide receiver. Honestly, a third wide receiver who I think's got a chance to be really fucking good. The best left tackle. I don't think I'm not the biggest McGlinchey fan, but he's a functional starting right tackle. And then offensive linemen that Kyle and those guys have historically always coached up. Like this scheme breeds like who's this John Williamson guy that's made a Pro Bowl? All of a sudden, that's a guard in the zone scheme. It happens all around the league forever with the Shanahan family because it's the easiest place to play. Now, if you're going to pass it a lot, which he doesn't, it becomes a little more difficult to just plug a guy in at a random guard spot. Kyle wants to run the ball. And then when they're not running the ball, they're doing play action. Kyle is not like you play for Andy Reid, you got to pass protect. Why? You drop him back 45 times a game. Kyle has nightmares thinking about dropping back 45 times a game because it means 2 things. Actually, it means one thing. I'm behind because it's never my game plan ever. So it's like I'm behind and I'm behind early, right? Because
even then he's running the football. We're going to run the ball to get back into this game, right?
Andy's like, this game plan's boring. Throw, Patrick. But when you know you got to throw and you throw a lot, which I'm good with that. Your individual offensive linemen have to be good pass protectors. You know, last year Andy drafted really high in the second round the center from I think Oklahoma. They've always invested heavily in those positions. They signed Thuney from the New England Patriots. Like it matters to them to have good offensive linemen because he's dropping back all the
Trent
time.
Williams.
That matters a lot. Ultimately, to Kyle, like he needs his guys to be able to run block because then he can scheme the pass off if they're running the ball down your throat. And he mentioned that with Tim. He goes, look back to 19. We didn't, people, it's easy to say now, but Jimmy hadn't played much. We didn't know. He had just coming off an injury, and we ran the ball well and we played defense. I think he's coming in with that mindset of the 19 team. Hit fucking people in the mouth, play big-time defense, run it down their throat. The difference, though, is that team, Debo was a rookie. Ayuk didn't exist. Kittle was starting to become Kittle, but he wasn't the known commodity. Like, they do have guys that, like, worst-case scenario, just run a quick screen, run a quick slant, right? I mean, they don't need to trade, for a wide receiver if they're all healthy. Like, they have 3 deep of guys that could score. Obviously, Debo can, but I think Ayuk and Jennings have, like, 7, 8 touchdown potential in them if they have a good season.
It's the most established that group has been to start a season for Kyle Shanahan.
And they drafted a guy high who in theory should, a lot of teams around the league, when you draft a guy in the 2nd or 3rd round, they're going to be 2nd and 3rd rounders all around the league, right? At wide receiver and running back to become good players. Well, the Niners did both. They drafted a wide receiver and a running back. So you'd say just on the odds, One guy's from LSU, one guy's from SMU. Both those guys are excellent college players. Like, the odds one of those two guys is going to be a productive rookie, right? Like last year, the Niners drafted a bunch of skill guys. It turned out Mitchell was, Sermon wasn't, but it's just the odds. And who knows? Maybe it's and the cool part about football is we talk so much early on, and just because, like, I'm not talking about an undrafted free agent until that undrafted free agent's really good. No one knew Matt Breida until all of a sudden, like, Matt Breida was kind of good and all of a sudden playing. That happens a lot, right? There could be all of a sudden you get like some undrafted tight end or undrafted running back or undrafted wide receiver who fucking they fall in love with in camp and he plays for them. That would be hard at wide receiver, but it's definitely possible at running back or tight end to just throw your hat in the ring and all of a sudden just get in the mix, right?
Yeah,
because
they really have
rotate
not had
at those
tight
positions.
end. They have not had another tight end do that in terms of being a pass catcher.